ASIC's arrogance is out of control. Martin North, John Adams, Industries People. John, we're back again. And guess what? We're talking about ASIC again.
In essence, this country is full of problems. All sorts of governmental problems, private sector problems, macroeconomic, micro, all over the place. And there's a lot of people who, in many regards, can't accurately define what the problem is. But once people get a feel for what is the problem, the question is how to resolve it in a way that you get a sustainable benefit and a sustainable outcome that the community, that the broader public is that it is able to enjoy. And so we have seen, like with the debt bubble, that issue continues to fester. It's getting worse and worse and worse as the bubble is going. And in terms of ASIC, multiple reviews, inquiries, royal commissions, its performance is getting worse. And in the last 6 months of these shows we've been doing in terms of this montage, we have heard from numerous people across the country with absolutely horrific horror stories at the hands of ASIC. And that's why, in terms of what we are trying to achieve here is I'm trying to achieve one is exposure of how deep the problem is, because I don't think the public and the parliament is fully aware of how deep the problem is, but also, basically to convince policymakers the old softly approach that in some regards the old Morrison government was wanting to pursue. It's not going to cut it this time. We actually need a complete, redesign of ASIC, new leadership, new funding model, and we just need better. We don't want a few tweaks here and there, and so when you see these a consistent pattern of failure, and again, I'm not saying that ASIC does no good work, because I'm sure there is some good work that they do, but again, there's just too many of these stories that are coming out of the woodwork that says to me that there's something really wrong. So you would have thought that in this context of the history of ASIC, my reports, and now we're seeing all these new contemporary stories, that ASIC would be somewhat humble and basically say, well, no one's perfect, but if we need to do better, we should do better. But what do we get from ASIC, the chairman, and one of these outgoing commissioners, is absolute contempt for Parliament, absolute arrogance. And only a few days ago was a story in the Financial Review where they accused the Parliament in the Senate of inefficiency in how they conduct oversight and wasting the time of ASIC. And I'm just thinking, who the hell are these people?
Well, John, it's very concerning. I agree with you, firstly, that the number of stories that we've surfaced over the last few months is pretty disturbing, and there are some common characteristics, and quite often it's people who actually tried to engage with ASIC and were unsuccessful, or people who essentially felt that ASIC didn't handle them in a fair and open and transparent way, or indeed people who've spent many weeks, months, years trying to get a case up to explain what was going on. And again, ASIC doesn't want to engage. So it's not just a few, it's a lot. And then when ASIC, is under the microscope, they're still trying to defend themselves and basically say, don't distract us from our true work, Parliament. Don't drive us to spend time on this stuff because we need to be over here. It's ridiculous.
Yes, and before we get into this article, Martin, is that we have to give the context of what happened in the last few months. So we did a show back in November where we discussed how on the morning of the 27th of October, but probably in the days prior, ASIC officials spoke to Parliament about the inquiry. And the rumour in Parliament is ASIC attempted to marshal the numbers to block an inquiry into its own performance, which to me is highly corrupt. So you have an agency that is has enormous legal powers to destroy people's lives, has a history of letting the real crooks and the big end of town off the hook, going after in terms of the small fish. And then when you say, okay, we want to look at your performance, their first instinct is to block an investigation by manipulating the parliament, completely inappropriate. And now, on the eve of the inquiry, as we get into February, and now they're attacking the parliament publicly, saying you're wasting our time. And you know, why? How on earth do they think that this is, you know, appropriate as well as good politics? I have no idea. But this is an agency that is clearly trying to discredit any scrutiny that they're going to get going forward, and they're just trying to say to the parliament, you know, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to do effective oversight. We're the smart people in the room. Leave us alone.
Yeah, absolutely, John. And it's worth saying, I think, that they're not the only official body that somehow feel as though they're above the law and, you know, they know right and everybody else doesn't know right. We should have the public right to ask questions and to ensure that these entities are actually doing what they should be doing and are doing it appropriately. And so it's absolutely appropriate for Parliament to ask questions. And the fact that we've spent a few months trying to get this momentum building, and now we're surfacing a lot of issues, suggests that there's a real set of questions here. And the reason that ASIC is doing what they're doing is because they don't really want to be prodded and they don't want to actually have some of this come out.
Indeed. So. I mean, Martin, why don't we just quickly go into the article? So the article was titled "Inefficiency and Gotcha Questions Are Wasting ASIC's Time." So this was published in the Financial Review on the 23rd of January. So why don't we just put slide one on the screen, and I'll just read the opening paragraph. Quote: "Oversight of the corporate watchdog is inefficient, resource intensive, and expensive, and gotcha questions from senators about niche matters are a time waste," outgoing ASIC Commissioner Sean Hughes says. The regulator's top dog, Joe Longo, agrees. Now, if they have particular criticisms of Senate estimates or inquiries, whatever, nothing stops the chairman of ASIC to either write privately to the committee chair or to pick up the phone and say, you know, we're a little bit upset about what happened. Can you do better next time? But no, they felt that they wanted to publicly attack the parliament through the national media, which is, if you look at the last decade, I don't think this has happened. I mean, quite extraordinary.
Yeah, it is extraordinary, and it goes back to what I said. I suspect that there's a sensitivity within ASIC about some of the issues that we are now, turning over. They really don't want any of this exposed. They want to go on their merry way, and so this is a way of trying to sort of run interference as to what the inquiry might be surfacing.
Yes. Now, the other thing I think is very interesting, Martin, is in terms of the timing. So why would you attack the parliament now? I mean, so basically, and we have an important announcement to make. So so obviously, as per our last show, what we said was that submissions for the Senate Economics References Committee's inquiry into ASIC was due on the 3rd of February. Now, I did make some communication with Senator Bragg in the last couple of weeks and suggested that some people may need some additional time. So the committee has agreed that they would extend the deadline until the 28th of February. So people now have an additional 4 weeks to prepare any material. And so what I suspect is going to happen in the next couple of weeks, Martin, is the committee has already received a number of submissions. So I think in the process of February, they will review what they have. And obviously, as February goes on and more submissions come in, they'll keep on processing them. So by the time we get to the 28th, I think the committee will have a firm view as to the types of submissions they have and the types of public hearings that they want to be able to conduct.
It does give people more time. I have to say, John, that a few people I've been speaking with have found it quite difficult to meet the deadline, despite the fact there was quite a long deadline. But now they've got more time. And as we've said on a few occasions, it doesn't have to be a huge document, right? It's really just a critical summary of the main points as to what the issue is, what ASIC did or didn't do. It's not a very long process to put a submission in. And so again, we'd advocate make a submission. If you've got an issue, if you've had an experience with regard to ASIC and you want the Senate to be aware of it, this is the mechanism. And it's a much better mechanism than actually trying to do a whole bunch of other methods to try and actually raise issues with ASIC. This is a through the front door method.
Yes, and one of the points we made in our last show was that I mean, this is probably the last time this decade that you're going to have this opportunity to be able to tell your story.